in our series on faith and experience, we did promise that we'll first talk about faith, and after that we'll talk about experience, and then we'll bring harmonizing them together, which will form the last day end time ministry of fathers and sons. Having taken some time, we have talked much about faith. We want to begin to talk about experience. I read from 2 Corinthians chapter 1, from verse number 3 to 6. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. For as the suffering of Christ abound in us, so our consolation also abounds through Christ. Now if we are afflicted, it is for your consolation and salvation, which is effective for enduring the same suffering which we also suffer. Or if we are comforted, it is for your consolation and salvation. And our hope for you is steadfast, because we know that as we are partaker of the suffering, so also you will partake of the consolation. Now, from the passage we have read, this is one of the truths that God taught me as He brought us into this commission of the end time church. Now, the Apostle Paul was talking of his experience in this place. In verse number 3, he said, Blessed be God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort. Verse 4 says, who comforts us in all our tribulation. Now, is the same Greek word that was used in that verse 4 for tribulation, that was used again in verse 5. It says, so that we can comfort those who are in any trouble. So it's the same word that was used. This same word was used in verse 3. It was used in verse 4. Then in chapter 2, verse number 4, the same word was used for affliction. In chapter 4, it was used again. Chapter 6, the word was used again. In chapter 8, it was used again. Then in all those places, sometimes trouble, sometimes tribulation, sometimes affliction or persecution, but talking of various challenges that come to people. But the emphasis is this. In verse 4, he said that God comforts them in all their trouble. Then in verse number 8, we do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, of our trouble. The same word that was used in verse number 4 for tribulation, for trouble, the same word was used again for trouble in verse number 8. For we do not want to be ignorant, want you to be ignorant, brethren, of our trouble, of our tribulation, of our depression, of our affliction, which came to us in Asia, that we were burdened beyond measure, above strength, so we despaired even of life. Then verse 9, yes, we have the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves but in God, who resists the dead, who delivered us from so great a death, and does deliver us, in whom we trust that He will still deliver us. Now, a talk of trouble they have in Asia, and then it does not say in this one God comforts them, but God delivered them. There's difference between comfort and deliverance. The difference between them, for comfort, it means words that are words of consolation to strengthen, so that a man can bear patiently the unpleasant situation that he finds himself, to empathize and to make the person, to show the person that you understand the situation he finds himself, and you are reaching out in mercy, in word of consolation and comfort, especially when you have nothing you can do. You can't deliver the person. You just need to go through. So it needs your words of comfort. But then, on the other ground, he also talk of God delivering. To deliver is to be brought out of any unpleasant situation, to rescue. Now, the same God, which was the God of comfort in verse 4, is the same God of comfort in verse number 8. The God of deliverance in verse number 8. Now, at the inception of our exposure to the ministry of the apostle, God said, this end time, the end time church will not be church of theory, but also of practical experience. Because it will have a role to play in the growth and the strength of the church. It's what will give strength, stability to the end time church. When the Lord was telling me this, it was the time that people celebrated faith to the desperate of practical, personal experience. When people are passing through trials, and it looks that the trial is prolonged, they look at them as somebody of no faith. You find this one, every testimony we're hearing by the time was just very, very positive. I have this one happened, everything positive. Some become so positive that they become unbelievable. And you begin to hear things like that. It is a pride of the people to say, I got married 30 years ago. We never had a quarrel one day. We never spoke one day. Even in attempt to be positive, some people will put in what is not true. You have people talking of how they get job, all positive, all positive, all positive, nothing negative. And those who talk of the situation they find themselves in reality were looked upon as people who does not really have faith that they should have. But God told me, faith plays role, experience plays role. There are times God will deliver in situation, in tribulation, in troubles. There are times He will not deliver, but rather comfort. And when they are comforting you, they were telling you to endure. Now let's look at verse 4 again. Now, who comforts us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble. He comforts them for a purpose, for a reason, is that they themselves will become a source of comfort or agent of comfort when others are passing through the same challenge. He said that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. He now says, verse 5, for as the suffering of Christ abound in us, so our consolation also abound through Christ. Now, the consolation of Christ abides in us as we go through situation, challenges, as we go through trouble, tribulation. He comforts us. He consoles us. He encourages us, so that others also, when they are passing through the same experience And deliverance is not just at hand. We just need to know how to comfort. So it says, the suffering of Christ abound in us, so our consolation also abound through Christ. He does not leave us. In the book of Isaiah, he said, he is afflicted in all the affliction. So, and Hebrew said, he is touched with the feeling of our infirmities. Then, in verse 6, now if we are afflicted, it is for your consolation and salvation. If we're going through any challenge, any affliction, any trouble, now it is for the saints. That's what he was telling them. The Corinthians say, he said, it was your consolation and for your salvation, which is effective for enduring the same suffering which we also suffer. He said, as we suffer it, we now become a master. We know how we ought to behave in such a situation. We have an experience of how he saw us through. Now, or if we are comforted, it is for your consolation and salvation. As he comforts us, that comfort is what we translate or transmitted to you when you face the same thing. And do you know, it is a comfort, a great consolation, when you are telling people who are in any challenge, the experience you have passed through and is similar. When we were born again in the middle 70s and late 70s, they'll be telling us, don't preach experience. Preach the Bible. We understand that is good. We preach the Bible. But the Bible itself is a book of experience, because it talks of people, it talks of Moses, it talks of David, it talks of Abraham, it talks of their experiences, and they were written down for our learning, especially we that the ends of the world are come upon. Now, it talks of Elijah, and the Bible says Elijah was a man of like passion as we are. He was not an angel. He was a human being like us. And then he talked of them. Now, there are preachers who had never taught if there be anything negative that has happened in their life. And we have King David, a man after God's own heart. We have Solomon, the wisest of all men. We have different people like that who have been in the pages of the scripture. They have their challenges. They have their various things that they have passed through. Now, Pastor Tunde Bakari was giving a message at a time, and he called it Ministry of Internal Affairs. And he was saying there are things that happen internally. And he began to talk of some of his experiences, which many preachers may not dare to say. But then, people have things to learn from it, because he was sharing practical experience. He was not saying, he was not trying to over-edit it. You know, if the modern day preachers and writers want to talk about David, they will edit away where he fell into the hand of immorality through Bathsheba, through his own carelessness. No, but the Bible wants us to see all. Fault of Moses was there. Fault of David was there. Here and there. And God put all down for yours and my learning, so that we know others have passed through what we are passing through. And then we could closely study and see how God delivered them. I bought a tape of one preacher many years back, and I cannot remember his name. And it looks like when he finished his preaching, he's weeping. And one of my sons in the faith said, that's how he finished almost all his messaging. He has a challenge in the family, a serious one, and has affected his life. And so as he finds himself in ministry, he said the majority in his church were people who have similar experiences and trouble. So when he talks to them, he feels for them. He understands their pain. He understands their feeling. And therefore, he can talk to them Weeping was not a strange thing in that church. It was not seen as weakness. It was not seen as a lack of faith. It was seen as a practical experience and a sympathy for one another. So in this end time, there will be practical experiences to build up the church. It will not just trying to make everything look fine. When you read the book of Jim Baker, and he said, I was wrong. He talked of his experience, Praise the Lord ministry. And when you know that this Jim Baker has been one of the people that has been instrumental to the blessing of our late Archbishop Idauza, yet he talk of this area, I miss it. This area, it happened like this. And it's a book I've read myself. But in this end time, it will not just be only doctrine and theory. Men of experience are needed. As much as faith is important, men of experience are needed. There are situations that there's nothing to do. You will just need a comfort and consolation. You will remember, for those of you who have read Tough Time Never Lasts, but Tough People Do, by Robert Schuller. When those dejected, sorrowful, bankrupt farmer, when they sat down, no doubt, Baba Robert Schuller must have prepared his message, his usual message, the message that disappeared in his hand when he was introduced. The man who introduced him said, we have known you. They know how he will give them sweet story, how he will talk of this and talk of that. They said, we don't call you for that. These men are dejected. These men are sorrowful. This their state. We call you to give them life. Now, Baba Show said he was going up and down on the pulpit. They felt he was just doing that for time. He said he didn't know what to say again. Because that thing that man has said has deflated his balloon. All what he want to say, 17 principles of this, 5 principles of this, it has gone. So he began to think and then trying to pray silently in his heart to God. And it was then God reminded him, you grew up in a farm. Your father is a farmer. And he reminded him of a time of recession that happened at that time. And then he began to speak. He began to talk of that experience under which he was brought up. And by the time he was talking, he was taking their attention. And at the end of it, that's what gave birth to that book. That's one of the best-selling books. Tough Time Never Lasts, but Tough People Do. He was able to give them the hope that they need to be tough with the situation from the experience that he can share with them that others has passed through. Experience is major because the end time church is a church of great revival. And whenever someone said, when heaven opens to bless, the devil opened hell to blast. We should be thinking of the persecution, onslaught of devils attack, trouble here and there, which will not only need faith, we also need the school of experience. There was a time they talk of a lady, a young Christian, who lost the husband. And in an attempt to console her, another sister came around and said, sister, I know how you are feeling. And he looked to her and said, you don't know how I'm feeling. Have your husband died before? The lady said, no. He said, so you can't know how I'm feeling. I am the one who know how I'm feeling. You can't tell me I know how you are feeling. Now, and truly, she can't know how she is feeling because she has not experienced it. We lost one young preacher in our area at a time. This preacher was a promising person. Even the society, he was accepted by many ministers and his fame was coming. He was in the youth ministry and he was running that youth ministry, accepted by people. And suddenly, the man slept. He went to vigil. He came, slept over the night, and never refused to wake up. He has two little children. And this man is the firstborn of the family. And the father himself is a preacher. So when they told me that morning, and I rushed down to the place because I was like a father to the person at least. So when I got there, because they were telling the wife, they are moving to this hospital, and they don't know how to really handle the situation. So when I got there, and I look at the whole situation, where the man was taken to, the man was inside the car. They have not taken him to mortuary or taken him to some, but they believe they want to bury him that day. He has a younger brother who is also a Christian. And this younger brother has become so sorrowful because the man looked like the hope, the first star that is rising in the family. He has cried and cried. He will look at his brother in the vehicle like this, and then the minister came around. You are talking to him. Where do you want us to bury the man of God? He was not able to answer. He was just weeping. And I saw them. They were saying, what happened? Are you not a Christian? Are you not a Christian? He has died. He has gone to heaven. And we are asking you, you are doing like this. I see people don't weep when Stephen died. The Bible said the church made a great lamentation. When he has seen heaven before he breathed last, he saw Jesus at the right hand of the Father. But they wept. And I wonder, because they lack experience, and they are making the young man to feel much more bad. And I got close to him. I greeted him. I say, I'm sorry. I say, sorry. I sympathize with him. And I began to tell him my own experience. I said, you know, in Yoruba land, I told him my first immediate elder brother were 8 with my mom, and then 4 boys, 4 girls. And the first and second were women. The third and fourth were men, including myself becoming number 5. Now, the number 4 that I follow rose up at the first star among my mother's children. Everybody see this one was promising. And then one Saturday, Black Saturday, he was crossing road, a vehicle knocked him down and ran away. And my mother felt so bad, it was like she was dying immediately. And so I shared that experience. He began to look at me. I told him how it goes, how we need to sum up courage. That same day, I need to minister, handle my Bible study, because he died on Sunday. On Monday, I was leading Bible study, but we have gone to the mortuary. We have done this. We have buried him, and from the burial ground, I went to the pulpit. I told him. He knew I knew how he was feeling, and I said, apart from that, our last born, the last born of my mother, is a brilliant person. Just fell sick. My mother was just recovering from sickness, and beside my mother, bed facing themselves, my brother breathed last and died. I said the sorrow and the shock was so much that my mother died the second day. I said when my brother died that evening, we didn't know that the mother will follow the second day. I said, but you see, now in Yoruba land, when you are an elderly person, you don't contribute to the burial of your younger one. Even if it's a place they cook food, you don't eat. I said, but on that occasion, the others that follow me were twins, they were ladies, they don't have much to do. Now, it was me that was bringing out money to see how we make coffin for him. I said, I needed to pay for the burial of my younger brother, the youngest among all. When he was hearing that, he was nodding his head. Now, experience made me to know how he's feeling. And then, after all that, I told him what happened to some international minister that I had. I told him of the founder of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, Baba Akindayomi, when one of his son, maybe his first one, I don't know, were told he was sick, And when he got to the point of death, he looked at his father and he said, Daddy, mon lole, which means, Daddy, I'm going home. And Baba Akindayomi said, I hope your relationship with Jesus is okay. He said, yes. He said, we meet on the day of resurrection. And that was how he went. I said, it's not easy for that man, for his own child, giving him bye-bye that is going to die. I said, but we're in the world here. Various things can happen. And when he had that, he summoned up courage. I said, where do you want us to bury the man of God, the prophet? He said, at so place, this one is this one is that. And the moment we settled that, I went to the house, I picked the wife. Nobody has told the woman what happened. I said, I won't allow these ministers, they are children of God, wonderful, valiant people, but lack experience. I don't know the way they will handle this lady. I needed to take her home and then settle her and then get some people around. Through experience, we are able to settle her so that it can pass through that trying times. So God, who comforts us in all our trouble, is making us to be a comfort to others. That is the work of the Spirit. Now, Romans chapter 5, I read from verse number 1. High place of experience. Now, there are things faith may not do, but experience will do. I read from verse 1. Therefore, having been, Romans 5, 1. Therefore, having just been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom also we have access by faith into this grace, in which we stand and rejoice in hope of the glory of God. But not only so, in verse 3 said, and not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, in trouble, in challenges, in persecution, in afflictions, we glory. Why? We know that tribulation produces perseverance, endurance. And it's the endurance that produces character, and character hope. Now, in the Yoruba land, they say, you have not suffered, you say you are wise. Who is your teacher? Now, situations, challenges, and trouble we pass through add to our experience. And as they add to our experience, we begin to learn how to be patient. And in that patience, our maturity is built up. I put it this way. Now, you look at a lizard. If the WC cover is open and the lizard fell into it, the moment he jumps into it, he began to struggle. He began to struggle because the water there is not convenient, but there's no way he can climb out that chamber. That chamber, Paul, there's no way. He began to struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle. And after more struggle and he saw he cannot be out, he will sit down. He will stay there, He will just manage to put his head above the water so that he knew there's nothing he could do. And that's what happened. When we see challenges and trouble, we felt we can get ourselves delivered. We felt we can get through them. We felt there's a way out. We struggle. Not to struggle or to bother in challenge mean we are not a proper human being. But we come to a state that we know there's nothing we can do. Every method we know, we have prayed, we have done this, there is no way out. And then we begin to learn. That is why I say patience or endurance produces character, maturity. Someone said maturity comes through pain. And so it is those who have passed through who know how to console others. Let me show you from Colossians chapter 1. Colossians chapter 1, verse number 24. Paul said here, I now rejoice in my suffering for you and fill up in my flesh what is lacking in the affliction of Christ for the sake of his body, which is the church. Now, he said, I am filling up in my flesh. What's he filling up? The affliction of Christ for his body. He said, which is lack. That means, now listen to me, the work of redemption is complete. Jesus paid the full price. There is no area he has not paid for as matter of sin. But when it comes to affliction, when it comes to challenges and situations, there are some that saints will be passing through that Christ did not pass through because he didn't need to pass through. If you have challenge in your marital life, Christ has not passed through that because he didn't marry. If you have a problem with your place of work, Christ was never employed by anybody. So various situations comes in our life that are very challenging. Then there are others who have passed through that line that God will expect that through their experience, they will be a succor to us. That is the way the entire church will work, not just theory. And he told me, he said, a challenge of people, their places or their areas of challenge is going to be their high place, so that they can tell people, I know I was there. This has happened to me before. The person will listen very well. God wants that church to be strong. He wants that church to be vital. He wants that church to have vigor and vitality. And that's when we come and they were able to handle situation. You know, in the issue of faith, when there's no experience, when they pray for someone and it's not, they say it's your faith. That's your problem. Only God knows how many who have been injured that way. I could remember an experience. A lady lost the husband, and this is a young family, very young family. And she belonged to a church where they talk much of faith. And in their own practice, they told her, if you really believe that your husband has gone to heaven, you must be rejoicing. You must just be rejoicing. And then when they put the corpse down in a casket and they were doing the service, the lady was singing and dancing. You know, it's not herself. But they were complicating things. In the Yoruba land, hey, the family will say, why will he not dance? Shebi he knows what happened. And such women sometimes, what they will do for them, if they like, they take the children from them. If they don't like, they send her away with the children. They won't allow her to touch the pin that belongs to the man. Let her ready to go to court. They will stand it. And they will fight always, both spiritual and all over. If they had experience, they will know that a little lady, a young lady that lost the husband is a time of sorrow. Why does the Bible say, weep with them those who weep, rejoice with them those who rejoice? Is it a time of rejoicing for her? Practical, no. Only God knows various damages that has been done to the saints of God because of lack of experience. But in this end time, experience will be major. I mean, I tell you, if God is making you to pass through things and then you are gaining experience, understand that you are mounting to something in the kingdom. Stop your complaint. Stop crying and say, I am disappointed by God. No. He wants you to learn something. Keep your heart open. And as you begin to learn and to grow, by and by, you will see a generation that will need your help, who will be passing through that line who doesn't have your experience. So we are all waiting and expecting. So saying that our faith is the reason or basis for our victory, it does not mean we don't need experience. If there are no experience in the body, there will be problem. There will just be problem. Yoruba will say, there will not be an adult in the market, and the neck of the child, of a baby that is carried behind, will now turn the other way. Because the elderly people will say, take care, take care. Because when another adage in Yoruba land say, when a young child is cutting a tree, adults know where it will fall. So let me read, or let me quote from the book of Ecclesiastes to you because of our time. He said, blessed are you, a city when your king are not just babies, but if they are baby, woe unto you. Why? Because, let me read it the way it is. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, Verse 16. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your princess feast in the morning. When your king, when your leaders, when the authorities of the end time church, if all the authorities are baby, then that church is coming under woe. He said, blessed are you, O land, when your king is a son of noble, and your princess feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. So fathers has a role and young men has a role. In the second message, we'll hear it better, especially in the third one. Thank you, my brethren. God bless you.